Hey everybody, this is Matthew Soltesiak and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast. Using my sportscasting background, I speak with a variety of guests and interview key players to gain more insight on what makes this team go. As the Detroit Lions enter a new gritty era, we'll look beyond just the kneecaps when it comes to the analysis. Welcome to another episode. In this episode, we take a look back at the Detroit Lions' Week 3 victory with the Atlanta Falcons. We discussed that 20-6 victory. Yes, we'll touch on what went well, turning points in the game, if there were any concerns or takeaways, and the major storylines coming out of it. Let's get to it, Lions fans.
Hey everyone, this is Lomas Brown, and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast.
I'm joined today by Coach Jerry Angers, named Michigan High School Coach of the Year, as well as Coach of the Week by the Detroit Lions. He's also mentored numerous players to the college level and some all the way to the NFL. Good to have you here, Coach.
Oh, great to be here after that big victory today.
That was exciting. That was electric. I think my voice is still not fully recovered from 8 days ago when I was at Ford Field, but the game goes on. You play nonetheless. We keep the show moving. Folks, just a reminder as we get into this, listeners, please hit that subscribe button or that like button. It is helping us build momentum, just like the Lions are building victories right now. Coach, in our preview, you said we'd be smiling after this game. So how are you feeling right now?
Kind of a rough weekend for some of my football teams, but it always ends on Sunday with the Lions. And anytime they can win, we always can start a new week with a big smile on our face. So it's ear to ear, that's for sure.
It is, because it wasn't just a victory. It was the type of victory we saw. And Coach Campbell, right after the game, talked about it. Here's what he had to say.
Our defense was outstanding. AG did a hell of a job. And we looked like a hungry team. We looked like a hungry, violent defense. We got takeaways, we had tackles, TFLs. Guys were flying around the football, pretty good in coverage. And we were around the quarterback a lot. So I was proud of those guys. That was the problem we needed the most on offense. We came through with a big one. Golf hung in there. He took a few shots, but, man, he played a tough game. And that old line just kept banging away,
So as Coach Campbell said, the defense set the tone for this game early. The offense made the plays when they had to. So we're going to talk about what we liked. And, Coach, this might be our longest segment of the show today. I guess let's start with the Lions defense and how they played right up front. That defensive line, it's that area you always tell me is so important because everybody behind them is affected by it. And what a difference a week makes.
Oh, no doubt about it. And again, you're week in and week out, how good is the offensive line? What's the offensive scheme going to be? How are they going to chip Hutch? How are they going to, stop McNeil from getting in there? We put Bugs in the game this week. I just think there was a lot of things. I think they had, like Coach Campbell said earlier in the week, we're getting back in the mud. And I think he just had them in a situation where they knew that they were going to get muddy, they were going to get dirty, and they're going to have to play as hard as they possibly could. And they can't give up big plays. They talked about their rush lanes. They talked about, 3 guys do their job, 1 does not. Today I thought we saw a lot of 4 guys always doing their jobs. And I think that made a big difference. And we were flying around, linebackers were flying around, and, which helps your D-line. And, of course, we had some pretty good pressure on the quarterback, too.
You want to talk about pressure, Dan? Yeah, the Lions had some pressure, right? Aleem McNeil got in there early. He was all over the place. He got a sack. The Lions had 7 sacks in this game, 6 different players. Hutchinson had 2. Everybody was making their presence felt. And the encouraging thing was, you even said it, the linebackers were involved. Everybody was involved up front. It wasn't just 1 or 2 players.
No, and I agree. And a lot of those sacks too come from coverage. There was a couple times he held the ball for probably 3-4 seconds and we ran down from the backside. There were some long pass plays, that turned into sacks because we were relentless to get to the quarterback. So I think our coverage was better. I'm sure they went to the quick game, but I'm sure AG came up, with some great schemes to take away the quick game. This number 32 guy, I don't even know who he is or who he drafted, this Branch kid. If he's not, he could be the NFL Defensive Player of the Week as far as I'm concerned. He had some great coverages. And I think that I think that turned it into the front. And I think we were relentless up front, and we stayed in our lanes, and we did our job, and knew that if we didn't get to the quarterback, then the next guy up would.
Well, and staying in the lanes didn't just affect the quarterback. It affected rushing yards allowed. It affected what Bijan Robinson was able to get done on the field, as well as what Tyler Algier was able to do. I mean, they allowed 44 yards rushing. Bijan Robinson had 33 yards. I don't think anybody was expecting that outside of the state of Michigan. And let's be honest, maybe half the people in the state of Michigan weren't even sure that would happen. Bijan Robinson had an amazing game last week. He is the first running back chosen in the draft, and the Detroit Lions defense held him to 33 yards rushing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you look at that, and I think, that helped Gibbs out in his game. He came to the game, it's rookie against rookie. I think it helped Branch out. It's rookie against rookie. From that side of the ball, either competing and statistically and how they're going to lead their teams, or competing defensively and how they're going to stop that human being. And we just stepped up. Our rookies played a great football game today. As well as the rest of the team, but you can't say enough about those four guys. And we had some big hits, and when they did break it, we made sure they didn't stack them or get another good play coming up.
Well, and you said Brian Branch, he is doing it again. He had 11 tackles today. They were all solo tackles. You saw him busting through and stopping run plays in the backfield. He had 3 tackles for a loss. He had 2 passes defended. That guy was everywhere, and that kind of goes back into the secondary a little bit. The Lions have talked about the next man up. And how about a huge shout-out for Afatu Melifonwu and Tracy Walker, both starting at safety today, and they played great. They had huge plays on the same drive that helped shift the momentum in this game a little bit.
Yeah, but and you know what, you talk about huge plays on the same drive that shifted the game when they had those 2 pass breakups. And you go back to the Kansas City game, we had Campbell knock the ball down, and Branch had a touchdown return for a touchdown against Kansas City. I don't want to bring up past games, but you look at when you have 2 plays to ignite your full team like that in a row, everybody else feeds off it. And that's what those 2 safeties did, as well as Branch, as well as the linebacking core, as well as the D-line. They start feeding off each other, and it gets scary. That defense is pretty good when they're feeding off each other.
Those are great points, because that builds momentum for the defense, which can carry over to the offense. And after the game, Aiden Hutchinson, who had 2 sacks, he had a fumble with a recovery, talked a little bit about it as well.
This game really did test my mental toughness. It's hard, man, when you feel like you're a part of it, so it's took some mental toughness, but this game is 4 quarters. Yeah, last week was rough. It was a game that we had our eyes on, and they got the better of us defensively, so we wanted to come out this week and prove a point, and I think we did that. But I mean, it's only 1 game, so it's just going to be a consistent long battle that we're going to have to do with our defense. So I don't think we're getting too high. I'm not, it's exciting, but with the loss last week, win this week, it's just the ebbs and flows of the game. So you got to stay consistent with it.
So again, Hutchinson, talking about a previous game as well, reminds you that the Lions were working at something for this game. They wanted to come out because they knew they hadn't done enough last week on the defensive side of the ball. But he pointed out they're not going to get too high after this win. Again, though, what a defensive performance. 6 points total given up, 2 field goals allowed. That was it. What a great example of Detroit Lions football.
Oh, I agree. And you got to look at their last field goal. That was, hey, we're a 3-score lead right now. We played bend, don't break defense on that. So, we're going to give them that one. We're going to give them 3. They burn clock. That's what we wanted to do. And so I think that's when you hold a team like that to 6, they have weapons. We knew they had weapons, and we had to take them away. And I think that's one of the biggest things we did. We had, a couple games film this year as well as last year, and it helps. Last week, I don't think we knew as much about both tight ends or how they were going to run that scheme, where this week AG was dialed in, and so was the team. And so that was great to see.
Exactly, and you brought up a great point. That drive might have bothered some Lions fans where Atlanta got that field goal late in the game. The Lions burned up 5.5 minutes of clock, and they made sure that if Atlanta was going to score, it wasn't going to be in 25 seconds with one big play. That was great defensive scheming, and they held them to a field goal as well. So that was excellent play on the defense.
Oh, for sure. There's no doubt about that. And again, they did exactly what I wanted to do. They gave up 3 points, and like you just said, burned 5 minutes off the clock. And let's put the ball back in the our running game hands and see if we can finish this game off. And we did.
And that's a great example of the Detroit Lions football that we saw late last season that Dan Campbell wanted them to get back to. And so that goes back to that same mantra, the next man up. As we go over to the offense, we start at the offensive line. Matt Nelson was in there for Taylor Decker. Matt Nelson left with an injury. Dan Skipper comes in. Oh, by the way, we signed him this week off the practice squad. And then he gets hurt. And then the rookie Kobe Sorsdale comes in there. That's like your fourth string offensive lineman coming in. And, it might not have been perfect, but it got the job done. And that's what you look for in an emergency situation like that, isn't it, Coach?
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, and and Sewell's on the wrong side of the ball for himself right now, and he struggled in some situations, but those guys just kept coming in. That's the thing about in the NFL. How many teams are out there right now that have 7, 8 guys on the injured reserve or didn't dress this week, and we were one of them, and yet we had guys that just kept stepping in and making a play. I kind of mentioned it earlier off of that situation is we didn't stack bad plays. We didn't stack missed assignments. We may have had a missed assignment here and there on one play, but the next play we were close to perfection. And Dan Campbell said we were getting back in the mud. Well, we didn't have any mudslides, which was good.
No, we did not. And you know what? Even behind that offensive line in the fourth quarter, when we needed to run the ball a little bit, the Lions managed to run the ball. So that was encouraging. With the offense, one thing that we saw this week that I was so thrilled about was we took some more shots down the field, and that was exciting. Jared Goff connected with Sam Laporta for 45 yards in that touchdown. He almost connected with Raymond, but missed that one. But again, he was able to come back with Laporta on the same drive. St. Brown and Laporta had 9 receptions and 8 receptions each. Those were some great things to see. And then if you even look at the running game, Jahmyr Gibbs had 80 yards rushing on 17 carries. So those are all some really good numbers.
Yeah, and they are. Knight came in. He had 3 carries for 13 yards. Craig Reynolds had 4 carries for 15 yards. I mean, again, by committee. And that was kind of what they got back to because we know that's what the Lions want to do. Okay? They want to use Gibb in certain situations where we don't have to use them 100% of the time. Knight, and like I said, Knight and Reynolds and St. Brown had a rush. Jared Goff had a rush. I think he ran like 4.140 for that touchdown. That thing took forever. I was scared to death. I wasn't sure he's going to make it. And I think that's the biggest thing. You go back to that pass play. Goff was so mad that he missed that deep pass. Then he turned around and hit Laporta on that other one. And the classic was when they showed his face, and he was just like, "Phew, I'm glad he connected on that one." That's the stuff where that's good. That's good football teams. Other, good football teams would sometimes fall apart in that situation and end up punting. Nope, they wiped it away, brushed it away, turned their heads, and went back to work and did what they're supposed to do on the next play. Like I said, they're not stacking bad plays.
Exactly. And, that was Jared Goff's first rushing touchdown as a Detroit Lion. And it wasn't pretty, but it sure was beautiful. I think that's like the most appropriate line for that.
Yeah, no, there's no better way than to take a team that's over aggressive to stop the run and let your athletic quarterback run in from 3 yards out. Loved it.
Well, and, also that drive with Jahmyr Gibbs and all the running we were doing with everybody up the middle and stuff helped set that play up. If we hadn't been successful running the ball, that wouldn't have opened up. Now, we got to talk about all facets because I think we also need to give a shout out to special teams in this game. Jack Fox punting was great. He had a 62-yarder. 3 of his punts were inside the 20. And even though Riley Patterson didn't kick a long field goal, he was 2 for 2 on field goals, and in close games, points matter.
Yes, and Fox, I'm glad you brought him up because he's one of the guys that we don't talk about because he's a punter, and the same thing with Riley. But talk about changing the field position. When you can tip the field defensively, to where they're coming out from inside the 20-yard line, that's huge. 80-yard drives and 85-yard drives, I don't know what the percentages are. And you got a guy like Fox. I mean, and I think Dan Campbell made some great decisions today in his play calling in that situation, saying, you know what, we're going to punt the ball here. We're going to stick them inside the 10 because they can't drive 90 yards on our defense. And then Pat Fox booms that 62-yarder. And again, he said our defense is playing well. We don't have to take as many chances as we did last week. And again, I think that, last week's game, our team and our staff learned a lot. And I think Dan Campbell and those guys learned a lot and used it very well today on what they learned from last week's loss.
Oh, I agree completely. That was the last thing I was going to talk about the things that I liked about this week, and that was the coaching decisions, especially that one where we were I think just past midfield, and I had people wondering, why aren't the Lions going for it? Even the announcers be aware the Lions, they do fake punts and stuff. The Lions are a step ahead of a lot of people. They're going to go for it when the situation dictates it. And when your defense is playing that well, like you just said, you push the other team back and say, okay, try and get 60 to 70 to 80 yards off of us and get in field goal range or whatnot. So I thought the play calling and the coaching was done really well for the Lions today.
Yeah, I totally agree. Again, you get into a situation where if you're going to be in a shootout game, then you have to take some more chances. But he came into this game getting their identity back. He came into the game. Again, we're going to go back to the mud. We're going to be in the mud. He came into that where this is what we're going to do. We are going to play hard-nosed, blue-collar football like the Detroit Lions can play whenever they need to. And that's exactly what they did. So, and that was great to see.
All right, Coach. So we won the game. We talked about a lot of great things, but even out of a victory, you can look for areas to improve, for things that didn't go quite as perfect as you want to. The first thing I have, I guess, and again, you can argue it's being a little picky here. Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta were two guys who got a lot of catches for the Lions, 9 catches and 8. Outside of those two guys, Khalif Raymond had 4 catches and Jahmyr Gibbs had 1. So I guess there might be a little bit of a concern that more guys aren't involved and that maybe there's too much of a reliance on just those two guys. Is that something you should be concerned about, or do you think it might have just been a situation of circumstance?
Well, I think that's one of them. I think Gibbs is probably because he ran the ball more, and I don't think they released him out as much. So I think that's part of it. One of the things that I noticed, and I saw Goff upset a couple times on TV with pass routes. The one where he was, yelling at the receiver, keep going, go deep. And then there was another one on and he had some bad passes, we think. But then I see him yelling at those guys to carry the route deeper, to do this deeper. So I think it works hand in hand. They may have had a couple more catches if they ran the route better. They may have had a couple more catches if Goff didn't have as much pressure on him as he did. And so I think those are things that, again, we're not in that film room tomorrow or Tuesday, whenever they do it with the staff. We didn't know the game plan. We don't know where the routes are supposed to be. So I think that's a concern, seeing that situation where Goff got upset, because we don't see that very often. And so I think that's something they'll work out and they'll work on, and I think things will change. Again, St. Brown and Laporta just put such a strain on a team. And, again, Raymond, 4 catches for 55 yards. That's pretty good stuff. I think that's one of the things that, you look at, with that situations. We still had 9, 8, 4, and 1. We still threw, and then we ran the ball well. So I think those things are going to offset each other. So that, from that standpoint, that kind of concerns me. Another thing that really concerns me is the second half opening drives. 2 weeks in a row we've stalled. Last week we fumbled, 14-7. Now it's 14-14. This week we stalled. I think it was a 3 and out. And those are kind of the halftime adjustments. Those are huge parts of a game and time to put a game away. But from this week's game, after we did stall, we did come back and had a great defensive stance and turned around. And I think we came back and scored on the next drive, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, the injury bug, I wish it would go away.
Yeah, the injury bug's going to be a concern, and that's going to be one of our major storylines talking about coming out of this. Another thing I thought was the Lions had a few too many penalties. Now, the nice thing was they didn't seem to stack the penalties on top of each other, and we were able to recover from some of them. But especially when it gets to be like defensive pass interference and stuff like that, those penalties can be tough. I know you said Sewell had a rough time. The announcers talked about it, him playing over at left tackle. Everything's the opposite. I mean, the shuffling around with the offensive line. That also led to Goff's interception. You know, he said today after the game, he said that was the worst throw of his career today. But the thing is, it doesn't concern me because, you know, his attitude and how dialed in he is. He said the defense helped out. Now, I did notice a few throws leading up to that. His throws were starting to go a little bit high, and that might have been to the pressure that was coming in, and they weren't rolling him out at that point. But then, like you said, they bounced back. And that's what Goff said, too. He said, it's how you react and come back from that. We saw it last week after his interception. They went down and got 10 points. We saw it again this week after that. The defense stepped up, did not allow a touchdown, and then Goff went right back and got to Amon-Ra St. Brown and got to Sam Laporta.
Yeah. And, you know, and again, he's back there with that mixed offensive line in front of him, and he knows he trusts all those guys. I mean, I know he does. They're his teammates, but he's a lot more trustworthy or loves them a lot better when it's all the boys are in front of him. And, you know, and that plays, we all know that. That's what you want. You want to rattle the quarterback. You got to get him off the spot. You know, I mean, the cool thing is, and let's go back to that, we moved him out of the pocket a few times. You know, we rolled him out. I think in the fourth quarter, we rolled out and he threw that I think it was a first down play. Well, so those were things where, hey, let's get him out of the pocket. Let's get his feet moving. Let's get him a completion. And Goff is pretty, he's got ice in his veins. He's one of those guys, like you said, he may throw an interception, which I'm glad he didn't find it last week because all we're talking about is the record. And now he's going to throw one, but you know that's not happening again because he learns on every one of his mistakes or his receiver's mistakes.
He does. So let's turn to the turning points or pivotal moments in the game because every game has those. The Lions were up 13-3 at the half. Like you said, they went 3 and out. Atlanta comes out running the ball a little bit to start the third quarter. And even though they did not have great running stats at the end, I'm kind of surprised they didn't stay with it more because they had some moments of what I would call competency. And they actually were able to get a little bit here and there. And I was surprised Atlanta did not lean on it more. And I'm also impressed with how well the Detroit Lions defensive line ultimately stepped up.
Yeah, I agree. And, that's the biggest thing. Atlanta's a run first team to set up the pass. You know, sometimes OCs get into a situation where, oh my God, we got to, we're down 10 points. We got to score. We got to get 7 here. We got to make a big play here. We got to make big splash play here. And so, but again, I think the Lions, there was 2 or 3 or 4 plays in a row where, we start getting a little nervous because, oh my God, but then the defense stepped up and made the plays that they needed to. And I think that was figuring out exactly what they're going to do. I think you and I mentioned it, back-to-back plays in the third quarter of those 2 safeties, right? And 2 safeties that didn't play last week and for them and do what they do. And I thought Walker was just phenomenal back there today, man. He had some big hits. He had a couple where he was just, if the pass would have been on. And so I think you go back to that where, they said, let's run. And now we're going to attack those 2 safeties. And that was a bad mistake. And then that 32 branch kid, oh my God, he was everywhere with that too. So.
He played an excellent game, as did the defense. The defense actually had the other pivotal turning point as well. Early in the fourth quarter, Lions are up 13-3, and Atlanta's at the 38-yard line of the Lions, and they go for it on 4th and 5. The defense stops them right there. They could have kicked a field goal to try and make it 13-6, but they didn't. So not only does the defense get the huge stop, the offense then responds with a 72-yard drive for a touchdown, and that makes it 20-3, and that effectively seals the game at that point. It's never over, but it put it so much further out of reach, especially with the defense playing so well for the Lions that was also pivotal.
Yeah, that's a great point on that. And last week that 4th and 5 probably went for a first down. This week we had made adjustments, and again we had pressure up front. We had Ritter's happy feet. Worrying about getting sacked again with all those pressures or the sacks, and we just rallied around the ball. I mean, guys flew to the football as soon as that ball was released, and that was just great to see.
Yeah, this was the arguably best, most complete game for the Lions this year with the way the defense played. I'm not saying this is bigger than the Chiefs' victory, but the way you saw them swarm around the ball and play defense and only allow 6 points, even if the offense wasn't completely perfect, and considering we did this without so many players, you've got to be really impressed the way everybody stepped up. And as Dan Campbell talked about, he needed reliable players to be reliable, and I think we saw that.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. I mean that we always talk about the next man up, or you're one play away from starting. And when you get that opportunity, you got to stack plays. When you get on the field, you better make one play so that you get two, and you got to make three and make four. That's what coaches look at. And there was a lot of guys that just kept stacking plays. And and stepping up for injured guys, and guys were stacking plays that are normal starters. So it was just a great victory, I think.
Well, and adding on to that, then let me ask you, one of the major storylines is the Lions were without so many starters, and they had more losses on the offensive line during the game. And so when you have different guys coming in, coming out as a coach, what are you telling your players, and how does a team adjust on the fly like that?
Well, again, you leave that out to them. Your assignment. Maybe offensively you have to gear down the playbook a little bit, shrink it down a little bit, get those guys comfortable. You came into the game with a game plan. They're professional athletes, so professional athletes know that, again, I'm in the game. I got to get my job done. I want to stick around. It's a paycheck. And so I think that's the mentality they took all week in practice because of the injuries and because of the guys that they brought in and because of the guys that they released. And I think, they had it set up for no matter what happened in this game, somebody was going to step in and do what they had to do. And I think that's what they did. Again, we had some rough plays, but we had a lot of great plays to seal a deal. And I think that was the mentality that Dan Campbell and the rest of the staff were trying to get across for this week, that no matter what happens, we are not losing this football game. And that's what happened. They did not lose the football game.
Those are excellent points. And yes, they won the game even with more losses throughout the game. Again, it's one thing to come into a game injury riddled. It's another one to get even more within that game. One of the storylines looking at is this is a short week going into Lambeau. What's going to become of some of these injured players? Are we going to get some of these offensive linemen back? Will Taylor Decker be available? Will David Montgomery be available? Kirby Joseph, some of the guys who were out this past week. I think that's going to be one of the things to watch over the next few days.
Yeah. We only have a few days. So, and even, I think last week, I think about Dan's press conference last week. I think it was him talking about, again, it's a marathon. It's a long thing. I got to look at what's best for the season. Maybe if this was a playoff game, maybe Decker would have played. If this was a playoff game, maybe, Montgomery would have played. But I think it's a long season. This is only week 3. And we got 14, you got 14 more games to play. And so I think that's something as a coaching staff, and he's going to listen to what his medical personnel tell him to do. And, if he can hold those guys out and win a game on Sunday against Atlanta and get them all back for a divisional game on Thursday, that may be what they did. So, we're definitely going to find out tomorrow, because I think I don't think there's any off days this week.
Excellent points. And you're exactly right. The Lions are going to be taking on the Packers on Thursday. Green Bay came back late in their game against the Saints. So that means we have 2 teams at 2-1 who are going to be fighting for first place in the division come Thursday. Coach, any final thoughts before we get out of here today?
The only good thing about this week is it's 4 days we get to watch another NFL Detroit Lions football game on Thursday night. So it should be a short week, and we'll be doing a lot of reading and things like that, but looking forward to Thursday night.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Coach. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. You can find all the episodes at notthesameoldlions.com. If you have a question about the Lions you'd like answered on the show, email me, Matthew@notthesameoldlions.com. If you're listening on YouTube, please hit that like button. While you're at it, tell your friends about the show. Please subscribe regardless of your listening platform. And until next time, stay gritty, my friends.